Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the cargo manifest one more time. The numbers had to be perfect. One mistake and the Catherian patrol ships would know exactly what he was carrying. Medical supplies were banned from reaching the human colonies, and getting caught meant death. The Liberty's Edge sat in the loading dock of Station 7, looking like any other beat-up cargo ship. Paint peeled from her hull, and rust stains marked where repairs had been made with whatever parts Jake could find. She was ugly, but that was the point. Nobody paid attention to ugly ships. Lisa Brooks crawled out from under the engine console, oil smeared across her cheek. She had been Jake's engineer for 3 years now, ever since they both left the Colonial Defense Force. "Power systems are running hot again," she said, wiping her hands on a dirty rag. "I can keep her going, but we need new coolant coils soon." Jake nodded. Money was always tight, but keeping the ship running came first. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 2 weeks if we push her hard. A month if we take it easy." Lisa knew Jake would push the ship hard. He always did when people were counting on them. Tony Garcia walked up the loading ramp, carrying his duffel bag. The weapons specialist had been off-ship for 2 days, visiting contacts in the station's lower levels. "Got us some extra firepower," he said quietly. "Nothing fancy, but it might help if we run into trouble." Amy Fletcher looked up from her navigation charts. The young woman had joined the crew only 6 months ago, but she was the best pilot Jake had ever seen. "Course is plotted," she said. The route to Haven's Rest would take them through 3 different star systems, all controlled by the Catherian Empire. Jake gathered his crew around the cargo hold. Boxes of medical supplies filled the space, marked as machine parts and mining equipment. Each box contained antibiotics, surgical tools, and medicine that could save hundreds of lives on Haven's Rest. The colony had been cut off from supply ships for 8 months. "You all know what we're carrying," Jake said. "You know what happens if we get caught? The Catherians shoot smugglers on sight. No trial, no questions." He looked at each of his crew members. "Anyone who wants out can leave now. No shame." In it, nobody moved. They'd all been through worse together. The Liberty's Edge left Station 7 at midnight, when most of the patrol ships were docked. Jake kept the engines at minimum power, moving slowly through the asteroid field that surrounded the station. 1 hour passed, then 2. Finally, they reached the edge of safe space. "Jump coordinates locked in," Amy said from the pilot seat. "First stop is the Kepler system. Should be quiet there." The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace. Jake settled into his captain's chair and tried to relax. The first jump was always the easiest. It was the second and third jumps that would bring them into Catherian territory. 12 hours later, they dropped out of hyperspace near a small moon. Amy immediately began scanning for enemy ships while Lisa checked the engines. Tony powered up the sensor array, looking for any sign of trouble. "All clear," Tony reported. "Looks like we picked a good time to travel." Jake wasn't so sure. The Catherians were smart and organized. They had ruled this part of space for over 200 years, long before humans had even left Earth. Their ships were faster and stronger than anything humanity could build. The only reason smugglers like Jake could operate was because the aliens thought humans were too stupid to be a real threat. "Second jump in 10 minutes, Amy announced. This one would take them deeper into enemy space, to a system the Catherians used as a refueling stop. The Liberty's Edge jumped again. When they arrived in the new system, everything looked normal. Few cargo ships moved between the planets, and a single Catherian patrol vessel orbited the main world. Jake held his breath as they flew past the patrol ship. The aliens didn't even bother to scan them. Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying reports from across the sector. The reptilian commander had been fighting rebels and pirates for 30 years. In all that time, he had never lost a battle. His fleet of 12 heavy cruisers kept perfect order in this region of space. A junior officer approached with a datapad. Sir, sensors detected a small cargo ship entering the system. Registration shows it as a human vessel. Vexstar didn't look up from his reports. Human. What type of ship? Appears to be a standard freight hauler, sir. Very old design. Minimal weapons and shields. The admiral waved his clawed hand dismissively. Not worth our time. Humans barely know how to fly their own ships. Log it as a merchant vessel and ignore it. The officer hesitated. Should we inspect their cargo, sir? Standing orders require? Standing orders are for ships that matter, Vexstar interrupted. That human garbage scow couldn't threaten a civilian. Transport. Don't waste my time with trivial matters. The officer bowed and left. The human ship was never entered into the official patrol logs. Jake felt some of the tension leave his shoulders as they passed the patrol ship without incident. Alone. Third jump in 6 hours, he told his crew. Once we make it past the border checkpoint, we'll be in the clear. The final jump would bring them to Haven's Rest, where thousands of colonists waited for the medical supplies. Jake had made this run 4 times before, but it never got easier. Every time felt like rolling dice with their lives. Lisa came up from the engine room looking worried. Jake, I'm getting some strange readings from the hyperdrive. Nothing dangerous, but the signature might look different to their sensors. Different how? Jake asked. More military than civilian. The modifications we made after leaving the Defense Force are still showing up in the engine output. Jake considered. This if the Catharians realized the Liberty's Edge was a former military vessel, they would ask uncomfortable questions. Questions that would lead to discovering the medical supplies. Can you mask it? Lisa nodded. Give me 2 hours, and I can make our engines look like they came from a junkyard. Do it, Jake said. He turned to Tony and Amy. We go in quiet and simple. Just another beat-up cargo hauler making a delivery run. Nothing special about us at all. The Liberty's Edge continued toward Haven's Rest, carrying hope to a desperate colony. Behind them, Admiral Vexstar prepared his fleet for routine patrol duties, never knowing that the small human ship he had dismissed would soon change everything. The Liberty's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Haven's Rest system. Amy Fletcher immediately checked her instruments while Lisa monitored the engines. Everything looked normal, but Jake Morrison felt something was wrong. 20 years of dangerous flying had taught him to trust his instincts. Scan the system, Jake ordered Tony Garcia. I want to know about every ship, every station, every piece of floating metal out there. Tony's fingers moved quickly across the sensor controls. After a few minutes, his face went pale. Jake, we have a problem. 3 Catharian heavy cruisers are moving toward us. They're coming in fast. Amy spun around in her pilot seat. How did they know we were coming? Our route was clean. Nobody should have been able to track us. Jake felt his stomach drop. The Catharians never sent 3 heavy cruisers after a simple cargo ship. They knew what the Liberty's Edge was carrying, or they suspected something important enough to risk a major attack. Time until they reach us, Jake asked. 15 minutes. At their current speed, Tony replied. They're not trying to hide. All weapons are powered up and ready to fire. Lisa ran to her engine console. I can give you full power, but the hyperdrive needs 10 minutes to cool down before we can jump again. We don't have 10 minutes, Jake said. He turned to his crew, the people who had followed him through 3 years of dangerous runs. Is it? They're not here to arrest us. They're here to kill us. Amy's hands shook slightly as she gripped the flight controls. What do we do? Jake walked to the weapons locker and pulled out his old Colonial Defense Force uniform jacket. The blue fabric was faded, but the captain's bars still gleamed on the shoulders. He had hoped never to wear it again, but some fights chose you whether you wanted them or not. Tony, bring up the hidden weapon systems. Lisa, I need every bit of power you can give me. Amy, when I give the word, you fly this ship like you're dancing with death. His crew stared at him. The Jake Morrison they knew was a careful smuggler who avoided fights. But the man putting on the old military jacket was someone different, someone harder. The weapon systems, Tony asked? Jake, if we use those, there's no going back. The Catharians will know exactly what we are. They already know, Jake said, fastening the jacket. 3 heavy cruisers don't come after smugglers, they come after threats. Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human ship on the main screen. The vessel looked even more pathetic up close, with its patched hull and mismatched equipment. But intelligence reports suggested this particular Ship had been spotted near 3 different human colonies that had somehow received banned medical supplies. Target their engines first, Vexstar ordered. I want to board that ship and question the crew before we execute them. His weapons officer, a young Catherian named Zektar, activated the targeting systems. Sir, should we attempt to contact them first? Offer them a chance to surrender? Vexstar's reptilian face showed disgust. Humans don't deserve the courtesy of surrender. They are a disease spreading through our territory. We cure diseases by destroying them completely. The 3 Catherian cruisers closed the distance to the Liberty's edge. Each ship was 5 times larger than the human vessel, enough firepower to level a small city. Admiral Vexstar had used this same tactic dozens of times against pirates and rebels. The result was always the same. 10 kilometers in closing, the navigation officer reported. Target is not attempting to flee. Vexstar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Of course they're not fleeing. Humans are too stupid to know when they're about to die. On the Liberty's edge, Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair and waited. The 3 enemy ships were almost in position. Everything depended on timing and the element of surprise. Tony, are the railguns ready? Jake asked quietly. Ready and loaded. Lisa rigged them to draw power directly from the main reactor. We'll have maybe 30 seconds of full power before the systems overload. That's all we need, Jake said. He opened a comm channel to his crew. Everyone remember your training. We've been through worse than this. Amy Fletcher remembered the Battle of New Shanghai, where Jake had held off 6 enemy ships with a damaged destroyer. Lisa Brooks remembered the siege of Mining Station Delta, where Jake's tactics had saved 2,000 civilians. Tony Garcia remembered the night raid on Kepler Base, where Jake had turned a hopeless situation into a stunning victory. The Liberties. Edge had never been just a cargo ship. She was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a former military patrol vessel that Jake had modified during the Martian Independence War. Her weapons were hidden behind fake cargo panels. Her engines were military-grade units disguised to look like civilian models. Her crew were all veterans who had served under Jake Morrison. When he was Captain Morrison of the Colonial Defense Force. Enemy ships are in attack formation, Tony reported. They're preparing to fire. Jake took a deep breath. Amy, execute evasive patterns 7. Tony, fire everything we have at the lead ship. Lisa, give me every bit of power we can handle without exploding. The Liberty's Edge suddenly transformed from a slow cargo hauler into a deadly predator. Hidden weapon panels slid open, revealing railguns and missile launchers. The ship's engines roared to full military power, accelerating at a rate that should have been impossible for a civilian vessel. Admiral Vexstar had exactly 3 seconds to realize. He had made a terrible mistake. The Liberty's Edge opened fire with weapons that didn't exist on any cargo ship. Railgun rounds traveled at nearly the speed of light, punching through the lead cruiser's shields like they weren't there. The Catherian ship's armor, designed to stop conventional weapons, crumpled under the impact of kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Possible, Vexstar whispered as his flagship shuddered under the human attack. Intelligence said it was a cargo ship. His weapons officer frantically tried to return fire, but the Liberty's Edge was no longer where their sensors said it should be. Amy Fletcher flew the ship in patterns that defied Catherian understanding of physics. Using every trick Jake Morrison had taught her during the war, the lead Catherian cruiser began to list to one side, its main engines destroyed by the surprise attack. Emergency systems screamed warnings as atmosphere vented from dozens of hull breaches. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel, Vexstar ordered. Destroy it immediately. But Jake Morrison was just getting started. The man who had once held the line against impossible odds was back in his element. The smuggler was gone, replaced by one of humanity's most dangerous military commanders. Target the second ship, Jake ordered calmly. Let's show them what humans can do when we stop pretending to be harmless. The news traveled faster than any ship could fly. Within 6 hours of the battle near Haven's Rest, the reports reached every human colony and Catherian military base in the sector. A single human cargo ship had destroyed one Catherian heavy cruiser and badly damaged to others before escaping into hyperspace. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office on Earth Station Alpha, reading the report for the 5th time. The words didn't change, but she still couldn't believe them. Jake Morrison, the man she had court-martialed 3 years ago for refusing to follow orders, had just started a war. "Ma'am," her aide said from the doorway, "the Colonial Council is demanding an immediate meeting. They want to know if this attack was authorized by the Defense Force." Kate rubbed her temples. The headache that had started an hour ago was getting worse. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. Get me everything we have on the Liberty's Edge and her crew." She walked to the window and looked out at the small fleet of human warships orbiting Earth. 37 vessels, including converted, cargo ships, and outdated destroyers from the last war. Against the Catherian Empire's 1,000-ship navy, they wouldn't last a week in open battle. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Vexstar stood in the medical bay of his flagship watching doctors treat the wounded from his crew. 53 Catherians had died in the attack, and twice that number were injured. The shame burned in his chest like acid. Emperor Kethfer's image appeared on the communication screen. His golden scales gleaming with fury. "Explain to me how a single human garbage scow destroyed one of my heavy cruisers." Vexstar kept his eyes focused on the floor. "Your Majesty, our intelligence was wrong. The ship was not a simple cargo vessel. It carried military-grade weapons and was crewed by experienced soldiers." "Experienced soldiers?" The Emperor's voice rose to a roar. "They are humans? Primitive mammals who learned to fly only yesterday. How could they possibly defeat Catherian warriors?" "They used weapons we had never seen before, sir. Some kind of kinetic projectile system that ignored our shields completely. And their pilot flew in patterns that seemed to predict our movements." Emperor Kethfer's claws scraped against his throne. For 200 years, the Catherian Empire had been the dominant power in this region. No species had ever successfully challenged their military might. Now a single human ship had made them look weak. "You will take the 3rd battle fleet and hunt down this ship," the Emperor commanded. 40 of our finest warships against 1 human vessel. Even you cannot fail with those odds." Vexstar bowed deeply. "It will be done, Your Majesty. But I request permission to attack their colonies as well. We must show them the price of defying us." "Granted. Burn every human settlement you find. Make an example that will be remembered." For 1,000 years, Jake Morrison and his crew reached Haven's Rest 12 hours after the battle. The colony's spaceport was barely more than a cleared field with some basic landing equipment. But it looked beautiful to the tired smugglers. Ben Carter, the colony administrator, met them at the ship with tears in his eyes. "Jake, thank God. You made it. We heard about the fight. Are you all right?" "We're fine," Jake said, helping his crew unload the medical supplies. "But things are about to get very bad for all of us. I just gave the Catherians a reason to come after every human in the sector." Ben watched as colonists carried boxes of medicine toward the settlement's hospital. "These supplies will save hundreds of lives. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing?" Jake wasn't so sure. The right thing might have just doomed every human colony to destruction. But he had learned long ago that sometimes you had to choose between bad options and worse ones. Amy Fletcher finished her post-flight checks and joined the others. Jake had been thinking about what happened out there. Those Catherian ships flew in perfect formation, like they were following a textbook, but we learned to fight dirty during the war. "That's exactly right," Tony Garcia added, as he secured the weapon systems. "They expected us to run or surrender. They never thought we'd fight back, especially not with weapons they couldn't defend against." Lisa Brooks emerged from the engine room, covered in grease but smiling. "The hyperdrive is completely fried. It'll take me at least a week to fix it." "With the parts we have here?" Jake nodded. "We weren't going anywhere soon, which might actually be safer." The Catherians would be looking for the Liberty's Edge and other star systems. Not expecting them to stay near the scene of the battle, the colony's communication center suddenly came alive with emergency broadcasts. Ben Carter ran toward them, his face pale with fear. "Jake, you need to hear this. It's coming from colonies all across the sector." The broadcasts told a horrible story. Etherian battle fleets were attacking human settlements without warning. 3 colonies had already been destroyed, their populations killed or scattered. More attacks were coming. They're making examples, Jake said quietly, showing other species what happens when you fight back against the Empire. Ben Carter looked at the boxes of medical supplies, then at Jake. Was it worth it? All those people dying because we got medicine? Jake didn't answer immediately. He thought about the children who would live because of the antibiotics they had delivered. He thought about the surgical tools that would save lives in the colony hospital, and he thought about the thousands of humans who might die in Catherian revenge attacks. I don't know, he finally said. But I do know that doing nothing was also a choice. People were already dying from lack of medical care. Amy Fletcher was studying the tactical reports coming in from the attacks. Jake, look at this. They're using the same formation tactics against the colonies that they used against us. Perfect lines, textbook approaches. So maybe we can do something about that. You still have contacts in the Colonial Defense Force, right? Jake realized. What she was suggesting, Admiral Kate Sullivan would never forgive him for the court-martial, but she might listen if human lives were at stake. And if there was going to be a war, humanity would need every advantage they could get. Ben, I need to use your long-range communicator, Jake said. It's time to call in some old debts. The colonists continued unloading medical supplies while Jake Morrison prepared to contact the woman who had once been his closest friend and was now probably his greatest enemy. The war had started whether anyone wanted it or not. The question was whether humanity could survive what was coming next. Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the communication screen at Haven's Rest colony. Her expression was cold, but Jake Morrison could see the worry in her eyes. Behind her, the command center of Earth Station Alpha buzzed with activity as officers prepared for war. Jake Morrison, she said, her voice steady. I should have known you were involved in this mess. You have any idea what you've done? Jake sat in the colony's small communication room, still wearing his old Defense Force jacket. I saved some lives, Kate, and I showed the Catherians that humans won't just roll over and die. You started a war we can't win, Kate replied. Colonies have been attacked in the last 18 hours. Thousands of people are dead or missing. The Catherian Emperor has declared all human settlements to be military targets. Ben Carter, who was listening from the doorway, stepped forward. Admiral Sullivan, without those medical supplies, half our children would have died from the plague. Captain Morrison saved this colony. Kate's expression softened slightly. I understand the situation, Administrator Carter. But now we have to deal with the consequences. The Catherians are sending a battle fleet of 40 ships to hunt down Jake's vessel and destroy any human presence in this sector. Jake leaned forward. 40 ships? Kate, that's 3 times the size of our entire fleet. I know the numbers, Jake, which is why I need you to tell me everything about how you beat those 3 cruisers. Every detail, every weapon, every tactic. If we're going to have any chance of survival, I need to know how you did the impossible. For the next hour, Jake explained the modifications he had made to the Liberty's Edge, the hidden railguns that fired solid, projectiles at incredible speeds, the military-grade engines disguised as civilian equipment, the electronic warfare systems that could confuse enemy sensors. The key is that they think they know what we are, Jake said. They see old human technology and assume we're weak. We've learned to fight dirty because we had to. Every ship in our fleet has been modified with weapons and systems that don't appear in any database. Kate nodded slowly. And their tactics? Predictable, Amy Fletcher said, joining the conversation.
Ow.
They fly in perfect formations, like they're on parade. During the war, we learned to use chaos as a weapon. Random movements, unexpected attacks. Hitting them where they don't expect. Tony Garcia added his thoughts. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, but they can't handle kinetic projectiles moving at high speeds. We built our railguns using mining equipment and industrial fabricators. Nothing fancy, but effective. Kate studied the tactical data they were sending. Jake, I'm bringing the fleet to Haven's Rest. We'll make our stand there. Kate, that's suicide, Jake protested. You can't bring 30 ships against 40 Catherian heavy cruisers. They'll destroy you. Maybe, but if we run, they'll hunt us down one by one. At least here we can choose the battlefield. Kate's voice grew determined. Besides, I've been talking to the other captains. Rick Davis on the new Texas has been modifying his weapon systems. Sue Martinez on the Iron Will has turned her mining ship into a fortress. Every captain in the fleet has been preparing for this day. Admiral Vexstar stood in the war room of his flagship, studying the tactical display. 40 Catherian warships moved through space toward Haven's Rest, the largest battle fleet assembled in 50 years. Surely even the cunning humans couldn't escape this time, Sir, his intelligence officer reported. Our scouts have detected the human fleet gathering near the colony. 37 ships, mostly small vessels with limited firepower. Excellent, Vexstar said. They're making it easy for us. We'll destroy their entire fleet in one battle and end this rebellion. Captain Zektar, who had been promoted after the previous battle, studied the enemy ship profiles. Sir, many of these vessels show unusual modifications. Their weapon signatures don't match standard human designs. Irrelevant, Vexstar replied. Numbers matter more than modifications. 40 ships against 37. We have superior firepower, better armor, and more experienced crews. This will be a massacre. But Zektar remained concerned. The human ship that had destroyed their cruiser hadn't appeared dangerous either. Perhaps the humans were more clever than they seemed. The human fleet arrived at Haven's Rest over the next 2 days. Jake watched from the colony as ships emerged. From hyperspace, each one different from the others. The destroyer New Texas under Captain Rick Davis bristled with improvised weapons. The converted mining vessel Iron Will, commanded by Captain Sue Martinez, looked like a flying fortress with armor plating welded to every surface. Admiral Kate Sullivan's flagship, the light cruiser Defiance, took position at the center of the formation. It was the largest ship in the fleet, but still smaller than a single Catherian heavy cruiser. Kate said over the communication link, I'm giving you a temporary commission as Fleet Tactical Advisor. I need your experience with unconventional warfare. Jake accepted the rank reluctantly. He had hoped never to wear a uniform again, but the survival of humanity might depend on the lessons learned during the brutal Martian Independence War. The asteroid field, Jake said, studying the tactical display. We need to fight them in the asteroid field around Haven's Rest. Use the rocks as cover and break up their formations. Can we hide weapons in the asteroids? Kate asked. Already working on it, Sue Martinez reported from the Iron Will.
My mining cruiser places explosive charges in the large rocks.
We can turn the whole field into a weapon, Rick Davis added. I've got portable railgun platforms that we can anchor to asteroids. When the Catherians enter the field, they'll be surrounded by hidden weapons. Jake felt a spark of hope. These captains understood what he was trying to do. They weren't going to fight a conventional battle against superior numbers. They were going to fight a human battle, using every dirty trick they could think of. How long do we have? Jake asked. Catherian fleet will arrive in 18 hours, Kate replied. That gives us time to prepare the battlefield, the next 18. Hours were the busiest in Haven's Rest history. Mining ships moved asteroids into position while military vessels hid weapon platforms throughout the field. Every human in the system worked together, knowing that their survival depended on the plan working perfectly. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the colony, watching the preparations. In a few hours, the largest space battle in human history would begin. 40 Catherian warships against 37 human vessels, and whatever surprises they could prepare. The odds were still terrible, but at least now they had a chance. The Catherian battle fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a dark storm cloud. 40 massive warships formed perfect lines as they approached Haven's Rest, their weapons already charging for the attack. Admiral Vexstar smiled from his flagship's bridge as he watched the human fleet scatter into the asteroid field ahead. Cowards, he said to Captain Zektar. They're hiding among the rocks like frightened children. We'll blast them out one by one. But Jake Morrison wasn't running from a fight. He was leading the enemy into a carefully prepared trap. From his position on the Liberty's edge, now hidden behind a large asteroid, he watched the Catherian ships enter the field in their precise formations. All ships hold position, Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded from the Defiance. Wait for my signal, The asteroid field around Haven's Rest was huge, filled with thousands of rocks ranging from small boulders to chunks of stone the size of buildings. The Catherians had to slow down and spread out to navigate through it. Breaking up their tight battle formations, Admiral Vextar grew impatient as his ships moved slowly through the asteroids. "This is taking too long. Order the lead ships to blast a path through these rocks." "Sir," Zektar said carefully, "the asteroids might be hiding human ships. Perhaps we should proceed with caution." "Caution," Vextar laughed. "We have 40 heavy cruisers against a handful of human garbage scows. Even if they're hiding, they can't hurt us." The first Catherian ship to reach the center of the asteroid field was the cruiser Vengeance. As it passed between two large rocks, Captain Sue Martinez triggered the explosives her mining crews had planted. The asteroid on the ship's left side exploded like a giant bomb, sending chunks of rock slamming into the Catherian vessel's hull. "Now," Jake shouted into his communicator. The asteroid field suddenly came alive with hidden weapons. Railgun platforms anchored to rocks opened fire, sending solid projectiles into the surprised Catherian ships. The destroyer New Texas emerged from behind a large asteroid, all weapons blazing. The converted cargo ship Morningstar launched missiles from concealed tubes. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as his perfect formation collapsed into chaos. Ships were taking fire from directions that sensors said were empty space. The humans had turned the entire asteroid field into a weapon. "All ships return fire," he ordered. "Destroy everything that moves." But the human ships weren't fighting. Like a normal fleet, instead of staying in formation, each vessel operated independently, using the asteroids as cover while striking at vulnerable targets. Captain Rick Davis on the New Texas hit a Kithian cruiser's engines, then disappeared. Behind a rock wall, before the enemy could respond, the Liberty's Edge darted between asteroids like a hunting shark. Jake Morrison used every trick he had learned during years of smuggling and war, appearing long enough to fire his railguns, then vanishing into the maze of rocks. "Target the human flagship," Vextar commanded, pointing at the Defiance. "We destroy their leader, the rest will surrender." 5 Catherian ships concentrated their fire on Admiral Sullivan's cruiser. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around the Defiance, but Kate had anticipated this attack. Her ship was already moving, protected by a wall of asteroids that absorbed most of the incoming fire. "Iron Will now would be good," Kate said. Into her communicator, Captain Sue Martinez had been waiting for this moment. Her converted mining ship was the largest vessel in the human fleet. It was covered with armor plating and bristling with makeshift weapons. She emerged from her hiding place behind a massive asteroid and charged straight at the Catherian flagship. "Mining ship is attacking us directly," Zekta reported in disbelief. "Should we focus fire on it?" Admiral Vextar was too shocked to respond immediately. No sane captain would attack a heavy cruiser with a mining vessel. It was suicide. But Sue Martinez wasn't planning to ram the enemy ship. At the last second, the Iron Will released a cloud of mining explosives, each one programmed to detonate when it detected Catherian hull metal. The flagship's point defense systems couldn't stop them all, and dozens of explosions rippled across the cruiser's armor. Jake Morrison saw his chance. While the Catherians were distracted by the Iron Will's attack, he brought the Liberty's Edge around behind their flagship and fired everything he had. Railgun rounds punched through the damaged armor, causing massive internal explosions. "Impossible," Admiral Vextar whispered as his ship began to list. Half his bridge crew was dead, and fires were spreading through multiple decks. How can humans fight like this? The battle raged for 3 more hours. Catherian ships designed for formal fleet engagements struggled to adapt to the chaotic fighting in the asteroid field. Human vessels appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking when the enemy was vulnerable and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. Captain Zektar, now commanding the Catherian fleet after Vextar's flagship was destroyed, finally gave the order to retreat. 22 of his ships were gone, and most of the survivors were badly damaged. The humans had lost only 8 vessels. "All remaining ships, withdraw to hyperspace," he commanded. "We'll report to the Emperor and request reinforcements." The human fleet didn't let them leave easily. Jake Morrison led a pursuit that harried the retreating Catharians all the way to the edge of the system. Destroying 3 more ships before they could escape, Admiral Kate Sullivan surveyed the battlefield. From the bridge of the Defiance, debris from Catharian warships floated among the asteroids, mixed with chunks of rock from Sue Martinez's explosive traps. The largest Catharian fleet ever assembled had been shattered by a force they had considered beneath notice. Jake Shee said over the communication link, "You did it. You actually did it." Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, exhausted but alive. Around him, his crew was cheering with the rest of the human fleet. They'd won a victory that nobody thought possible, proving that being underestimated could be humanity's greatest weapon. "No, Kate," he replied. "We all did it. Every captain, every crew member, every person who believed we could fight back." The news of the battle spread quickly through human space and beyond. Other species that had suffered under Catharian rule began to whisper about the humans who had turned a fleet of garbage scows into a force that could defeat the Empire's finest ships. Jake Morrison declined all offers of medals and promotions. Within a week, the Liberty's Edge was back to smuggling runs, carrying hope to colonies that had thought themselves abandoned. But now, other ships joined him. Captains inspired by the knowledge that David could indeed defeat Goliath if he was. Clever enough, the Catharian Empire still controlled most of the galaxy, but they had learned a hard lesson. The small human ship they had dismissed as unworthy of official logs had become the spark that lit a fire of rebellion across the stars and space. It wasn't the size of your fleet that mattered most. It was the courage and ingenuity of those who refused to surrender, no matter how impossible the odds seemed.